In this video, I'm going to cover the process of how to name two-element covalent compounds. With covalent compounds, really what we are concerned about is the number of each atom in that covalent compound. This makes the covalent compound formulas a lot easier to name, although how we get to the molecules are a lot more complex. We have to use Lewis dot structures and abide by valence electrons and sharing rules, but the naming becomes easier. For instance, I have three covalent compounds on screen. If we just want to name them, we really only need to talk about a couple rules. Over here, to kind of give things away ahead of time, I would see this as tricarbon octahydride in the center, diphosphorus pentoxide, and on the right side, sulfur hexafluoride. Now, these sound very exotic, but really they end up being very simple. Since there's no way to tell by charges how many of each element there would be, the way we state the amount of each element is by adding prefixes. And we'll talk about this a little bit more on the next slide. So our specific rules. Let's first set ourselves up with three covalent compounds. And I'm going to put the count of each element below. So here we have 4 phosphorus atoms and 5 sulfur atoms. Here we have 1 selenium atom and 6 fluorine atoms. And over here we have 2 boron atoms and 1 silicon atom. Now our first rule is very similar to our ionic compound naming. The second element in any of these pairs is going to change its ending to IDE. So instead of sulfur for our first compound, that second element, we're going to change it to 5-phosphorus, and for now we'll call it 5-sulfide. We'll hang tight on this for a second. In our second element, instead of ending with fluorine, we're going to end that with fluoride instead. And for our last compound, instead of silicon, we're going to change that to silicide. It's very similar to our ionic compound naming. The second element gets an IDE ending. Now for our next rule, and our really last rule, we need to find our list of prefixes. And up here on the right side, I have our list of prefixes, each prefix corresponding to a different number. Now every element's going to get a prefix except for one specific case. When there is one of the first element in a compound, we do not add a prefix. We basically don't use this mono prefix for the first element ever. So if I looked at my first example, I have 4 phosphorus atoms. I'm going to change that to tetraphosphorus. And because we have 5 sulfur atoms, I'm going to change that to pentasulfide because it's that second element. So really we have tetraphosphorus, 4 phosphoruses, pentasulfide for our 5 sulfurs. For our second example, we have 1 selenium and 6 fluoride. Because there's one of the first element, it's just going to remain selenium, no mono. But because we have 6 fluorines, we will say hexafluoride. In our last example, we have 2 borons. We'll change that to diboron for our first element. And 1 silicide, 1 silicon. Because it's our second element, it does get the prefix for 1, monosilicide. And that's really it for naming covalent compounds. On this slide, you give it a try. Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can come up with the formulas for these 3 compounds: disilicon hexabromide, iodine pentafluoride, and hydrogen monochloride. Go ahead and pause your video. And let's check to see how you did. For disilicon hexabromide, we have 2 silicon atoms for the disilicon and 6 bromine atoms for the hexabromide. For iodine pentafluoride, we have 1 iodine atom. Notice the mono is not used on the first atom. And we have 5 fluorine atoms. And for hydrogen monochloride, we have 1 hydrogen, no mono, and 1 chlorine. We do add a mono because it's the second element. I hope this helped you understand how to name covalent compounds.